coffee was bitter, just like everything else in this house these days. I sat at our kitchen table, watching Isla spread organic almond butter on her gluten-free toast with the precision of a surgeon. Everything she did had that same calculated perfection, the way she arranged her hair, the way she positioned her laptop, even the way she chewed. "I'm not in the mood for love, Wes," she said without looking up from her phone. "Haven't been for a while." There it was, the declaration I'd been expecting for months. Isla Farrow, my wife of 8 years, had finally said it out loud. The funny thing was, I felt nothing. No surprise, no hurt, just a cold recognition that we'd finally arrived at the station we'd been traveling toward for the past 2 years. "Good morning to you too, sweetheart," I said, taking another sip of the bitter coffee. My inner voice was already running commentary. "Well, this is new. Usually she waits until after she's checked her email before dropping emotional bombs." Maren, Isla's younger sister, shifted uncomfortably in the chair beside me. She'd been staying with us for 3 weeks since her latest relationship imploded, and I could see the awkwardness written all over her face. Maren was the opposite of Isla in every way. Where Isla was sharp angles and calculated moves, Maren was soft curves and genuine reactions. "Maybe I should go upstairs," Maren mumbled, starting to rise. "No, stay," Isla said, finally looking up from her phone with that predatory smile I knew so well. "Wes doesn't mind. He's very understanding about these things. Aren't you, Wes?" The cruelty in her voice was unmistakable. She wanted an audience for this moment, wanted someone to witness her dismantling of our marriage over breakfast. Classic Isla. Everything was a performance, every moment an opportunity to demonstrate her superiority. I leaned back in my chair, studying my wife's face. She was beautiful, I'd give her that. Sharp cheekbones, piercing green eyes, auburn hair that caught the morning light streaming through our kitchen window, but there was something predatory in her expression, something that reminded me of a cat playing with a mouse before the final strike. "Understanding is my middle name," I said, keeping my voice level. "Speaking of understanding, how's work going? Still enjoying those late-night strategy sessions with Hunter?" The question hit its mark. Isla's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before reassembling itself, but I caught it, and more importantly, I caught the way her fingers tightened around her phone. "Hunter Pace is my boss, Wes. Sometimes business requires unconventional hours." "I'm sure it does." I stood up, carrying my coffee mug to the sink. "Maren, don't forget about the company charity event tomorrow, the Truth or Dare Challenge." Maren looked confused. "I thought you were going with Isla." "Change of plans?" I turned to face both women, letting my gaze settle on Isla's increasingly rigid posture. "I've decided to partner with someone who actually enjoys my company. Would you be interested, Maren?" The silence that followed was electric. Isla's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally cold fury. She'd expected me to play the wounded husband, to beg for her attention or storm out dramatically. Instead, I just publicly dismissed her in favor of her sister. That's fine," Maren said quietly, though I could see she was pleased. "I'd like that." "Wonderful." I grabbed my jacket from the back of the chair. "Isla, I'm sure Hunter can keep you company at the event. You two seem to have so much to discuss these days." I left them sitting there, Isla's fury radiating like heat from a furnace, Maren looking like she'd just witnessed a car accident. As I walked to my truck, I could hear Isla's voice rising through the kitchen window, sharp and accusatory. But I didn't listen to the words. I was too busy planning. The drive to my office gave me time to think. Isla thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She thought her little declaration was the opening move in some grand game where she'd systematically destroy my self-worth before discarding me for something better. What she didn't realize was that I'd been watching her moves for months, cataloging every lie, every suspicious phone call, every late night at the office. My job as a mid-level manager at a struggling tech firm wasn't glamorous, but it had taught me patience and strategy. When you're dealing with failing systems and impossible deadlines, you learn to think 3 steps ahead. You learn to identify weak points and pressure points. You learn to wait for the right moment to act. Isla had just given me that moment. The next evening, the charity event was in full swing at Isla's marketing agency. The office had been transformed with string lights and cocktail tables, filled with employees and their partners, all pretending to enjoy themselves for a good cause. The Truth or Dare Challenge was the main event. Couples competed in a series of tasks designed to test trust and communication. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I arrived with Maren, who looked nervous but determined in a simple black dress that flattered her figure. Across the room, I spotted Isla holding court near the bar, her laugh ringing out like broken glass. She was wearing her power dress, the red one that cost more than my monthly salary, and she was clearly expecting me to show up alone and humiliated. "Wes!" Brady Chalmers appeared at my elbow with a beer in hand. My oldest friend, or so I'd thought until recently. Brady worked IT security at Isla's company, which made him privy to all sorts of interesting information he'd been sharing with my wife. "Brady." I kept my voice neutral. "How's the security business?" "Can't complain. Listen, about tomorrow's meeting with the Henderson account, we'll discuss it Monday." I cut him off, watching as his eyes flicked nervously toward Isla. So she'd sent him to fish for information? Interesting. The challenge began with simple trust exercises, one partner closing their eyes while the other guided them through an obstacle course. Maren and I moved through it smoothly, her hand steady in mine as I called out directions. Meanwhile, Isla had partnered with Jennifer from accounting, and they were struggling with even the basic coordination. "Next challenge," announced the event coordinator. "Partners must answer increasingly personal questions about each other. Wrong answers eliminate you from the competition." This was where things got interesting. The questions started simple: favorite color, childhood pet, dream vacation. But as the rounds progressed, they became more revealing. "What is your partner's greatest fear?" the coordinator asked. I looked at Maren, remembering conversations we'd had during her stay with us. "Being invisible," I said quietly. "Being overlooked and forgotten?" Her eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. She told me this during a late-night conversation in our kitchen, after Isla had dismissed one of her ideas during dinner without even listening to it. When it was her turn, Maren said, "Wes's greatest fear is trusting the wrong people." The accuracy of her answer hit me like a physical blow. She'd been watching me too, seeing things that my own wife had missed or chosen to ignore. We advanced to the final round while other couples dropped out around us. Isla watched from the sidelines, her expression growing darker with each question we answered correctly. "Final question," the coordinator announced. "What does your partner value most in a relationship?" Maren answered first. "Loyalty. Wes values loyalty above everything else." When it was my turn, I looked directly at Isla as I spoke. "Maren values honesty. She believes that without honesty, everything else is just performance." We won. The crowd applauded as we were handed our trophy, a silly plastic cup that probably cost $5. But the victory wasn't about the prize. It was about the look on Isla's face as she realized that her sister and her husband had just demonstrated a connection she'd never bothered to build with either of us. "Congratulations," Isla said when she finally approached us, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "What a surprising partnership." "Sometimes the best partnerships are the ones you don't expect," I replied, accepting a kiss on the cheek from Maren. "Thanks for being such a great partner." "Thank you for seeing me," Maren said softly, and I knew she wasn't just talking about the game. Isla's composure cracked just slightly. "Well, I should mingle. Hunter wanted to discuss some upcoming projects." There it was again. Hunter Pace, her boss, the man she'd been having those late-night strategy sessions with. I watched as she made her way across the room to where Hunter stood near the windows, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit tailored to perfection. He was everything I wasn't: wealthy, powerful, connected. He was also married, though his wife rarely made appearances at company events. "She's going to make you pay for it tonight," Maren said quietly. "Let her try." I was still watching Isla and Hunter, noting the way they stood just slightly too close, the way his hand lingered on her lower back. Some prices are worth paying. The evening wound down with small groups clustering around the bar and scattered tables. I made polite conversation with Isla's colleagues, played the role of the supportive husband while mentally cataloging every interaction between my wife and her boss. They were careful, but not careful enough. A touch that lasted too long, a whispered conversation that made Isla laugh in a way I hadn't heard in years, the way they both stepped outside onto the balcony for what Hunter loudly announced was a quick discussion about the Morrison campaign. They were gone for 23 minutes. I know because I timed it. "Ready to go home?" Maren asked as the crowd began to thin. "More than ready." I helped her with her coat, noting that Isla was still outside with Hunter. "Let's not wait for Isla. She seems busy." We left without saying goodbye. As we walked to my truck, I felt something shift inside me, a cold certainty settling into place like a key turning in a lock. The game had begun, and Isla had just made her first major mistake. She'd underestimated me. The basement of our house had always been my domain. Isla never came down here, claiming it was too cluttered and depressing. She was right about the clutter. Old furniture, boxes of Christmas decorations, my workshop area where I fixed things that probably weren't worth fixing. But she was wrong about it being depressing. Down here, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and motor oil, I could think clearly. I'd converted a corner of the basement into a small office space, complete with a desk, filing cabinet, and my old laptop. Isla assumed I used it for work overflow and hobby research. She had no idea that I'd been using it to investigate her. It started 3 months ago when she began working late more frequently. At first, I'd accepted her explanations, big client, important deadline, team-building exercises, but then I noticed the patterns. The late nights always fell on the same days of the week. She always came home smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. And she'd started keeping her phone face down during dinner, something she'd never done before. So I'd started paying attention. The Find My Phone app was a beautiful thing when you knew how to use it properly. Isla thought she'd been clever, turning off location sharing for most apps, but she'd forgotten about the family safety features we'd set up years ago after her sister had a car accident. Those were still active, still pinging her location every few minutes. According to the data I'd been collecting, Isla's late nights at the office frequently included stops at a lakeside cabin about 20 miles outside of town. The cabin was registered to Hunter Pace. I pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been maintaining, cross-referencing her location data with her text messages and phone calls. The pattern was clear as daylight. Every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks, Isla had been at that cabin between 7 and 10 p.m. "Wes?" Maren's voice came from the top of the basement stairs. "Are you down there?" "Yeah, come on down." She descended carefully, holding the railing. She was wearing jeans and one of my old college sweatshirts, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger like this, less polished than Isla, but somehow more real. "What are you working on?" she asked, glancing at my laptop screen. I considered lying, keeping her out of it, but Maren had been living in our house for weeks now, watching the same cold interactions I'd been enduring. She'd seen Isla's cruelty at breakfast, witnessed her sister's complete dismissal of our marriage. "I'm documenting your sister's affair," I said simply. Maren's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, sadness, and finally, resignation. Hunter Pace. It wasn't a question. "You knew?" She sat down on an old wooden stool, wrapping her arms around herself. I suspected. The way they look at each other at work, the way she lights up when he's around. She's never looked at you like that, not even in the beginning. The honesty of her statement stung, but it was a clean pain, better than the slow poison of pretending everything was fine. "How long have you been tracking her?" 3 months of serious documentation, but I've been suspicious for longer. I turned the laptop screen toward her. "Want to see what your sister's been up to?" For the next hour, I walked Maren through my evidence. Location data showing regular visits to Hunter's cabin, credit card statements showing purchases at expensive restaurants I'd never been to, phone records showing lengthy calls to Hunter's number at odd hours. Even social media analysis. Isla had been careful not to post photos with Hunter, but she'd been liking and commenting on his posts with suspicious frequency. "This is thorough," Maren said finally. "I'm good at research. It's part of my job." "What are you going to do with all this?" That was the question I'd been wrestling with for weeks. The easy answer was divorce court. Present the evidence, get a favorable settlement, move on with my life. But something about Isla's cruelty at breakfast, the way she'd tried to humiliate me in front of her sister, had awakened something darker in me. "I'm going to make her pay," I said. "Not just in court. I want her to feel what she's put me through." Maren was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "What do you need me to do?" "I need someone on the inside, someone who can watch and listen at her office, someone she trusts enough to let her guard down around. She doesn't trust me, she barely tolerates me. But she underestimates you, just like she underestimates me." I closed the laptop and turned to face her fully. Isla thinks she's the smartest person in every room. That's going to be her downfall. "This could get messy, Wes. It's already messy. Now we're just going to make sure she's the one who gets dirty." Maren nodded slowly. "Okay, but I want something in return." "Name it." "When this is over, when Isla gets what's coming to her, I want you to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't become like her. Promise me you won't let this turn you into someone who enjoys hurting people." I looked at her earnest face, her worried eyes, and felt something twist in my chest. She was asking me to promise something I wasn't sure I could deliver. The cold anger that had been building in me for months felt good, felt righteous. The thought of watching Isla's perfect world crumble was more satisfying than anything I'd felt in years. "I promise I'll try," I said finally. It wasn't the promise she'd asked for, but it was the only one I could honestly make. That night, after Maren had gone to bed, I sat in my basement office and planned my next move. The cabin was the key. If I could get inside, document what happened there, I'd have everything I needed to destroy Isla's carefully constructed lies. The thought should have troubled me more than it did. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical Maine weather that seemed to seep into your bones and stay there. Isla announced she was spending the day at a spa retreat with some colleagues. Team building and relaxation. She'd be gone until late evening. I knew better. The spa retreat was cover for another rendezvous at Hunter's cabin. "I'm going to visit my mom," Maren told Isla over breakfast. "She's been asking when I'm going to stop imposing on you two and find my own place." "That's probably for the best," Isla said without looking up from her phone. "You can't hide out here forever." The casual cruelty in her voice made my jaw clench. This was Maren's sister, the person who should have been supporting her through a difficult time, and Isla couldn't even pretend to care. After Isla left in her BMW, Maren and I finalized our plan. She would indeed visit her mother, establishing an alibi and staying clear of whatever I might discover at the cabin. I would drive out to Hunter's property, conduct surveillance, and hopefully gather enough evidence to move to the next phase. The cabin sat on a private road that wound through thick pine forest before opening onto a small lake. It was isolated, expensive, and perfect for clandestine meetings. I parked my truck about a quarter-mile away and hiked through the woods, staying off the main road. The property was exactly what I'd expected from a man like Hunter Pace. Rustic luxury with a price tag that probably exceeded my annual salary. The cabin itself was a sprawling structure of logs and stone, with a wraparound deck that overlooked the water. Hunter's Mercedes was already parked in the circular driveway. I circled the property carefully, staying in the tree line, looking for the best vantage point. The deck seemed like my best option. If I could get underneath it, I'd be able to hear conversations from the main living area while remaining hidden. The space under the deck was cramped and filled with spiderwebs, but it provided perfect acoustic access to the room above. I settled in with my digital recorder and waited. They arrived 20 minutes later. I heard Isla's laugh first, that bright artificial sound she used when she was performing. Then Hunter's deeper voice, saying something I couldn't quite make out. "Worried about Wes?" Hunter was saying as they moved onto the deck directly above me. "Wes is harmless," Isla replied. "He's too comfortable, too settled to cause any real problems. Besides, he doesn't have the spine for confrontation." "He seemed different at the charity event, the way he partnered with your sister instead of you. That was a calculated insult." "Please, Wes doesn't calculate anything. He just stumbled into a moment of petty revenge. It won't happen again." They moved inside, and I had to strain to hear their conversation through the floorboards. But what I heard made my hands shake with rage. "Okay, Brady says he's been asking questions about your schedule. I keep feeding him false information. When are you going to tell him about the divorce?" "After the Hartley acquisition goes through. I need to secure my position first." "What about your sister?" "Maren's useful for now. She keeps Wes distracted." They talked for another hour, discussing their affair with casual indifference, planning my humiliation with the same tone they might use to discuss weekend dinner plans. Isla described me as pathetically predictable and emotionally stunted. Hunter worried that I might become suspicious, but Isla assured him that I was too weak to act on any suspicions I might have. The most damaging revelation came near the end of their conversation. Isla had been systematically moving money from our joint accounts into a private account Hunter had helped her establish. She'd also been building a case for emotional abandonment, documenting instances where I'd supposedly been neglectful or dismissive. With Brady's help, she planned to present evidence that I was an unfit husband who'd driven her into the arms of another man. "He'll be so devastated he won't even fight the settlement," she said with a laugh. "I'll get the house, the savings, everything, and he'll probably thank me for putting him out of his misery." I lay there in the dirt and spider webs, listening to my wife plan my destruction, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt and betrayal I'd been carrying for months crystallized into something harder, colder. Isla thought she knew me, thought she could predict my reactions and control my responses. She was about to learn how wrong she was. They left around sunset, Hunter's Mercedes pulling away first, followed by Isla's BMW 15 minutes later. I waited another half hour before emerging from my hiding spot, brushing dirt and leaves from my clothes. The drive home gave me time to process what I'd learned. Isla wasn't just having an affair, she was orchestrating a complete destruction of my life. The money she'd been stealing, the lies she'd been telling, the way she'd been using Brady to spy on me. It was all part of a larger plan to leave me with nothing. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated her opponent. When I got home, Maren was waiting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and worried eyes. "How did it go?" she asked. I told her everything I'd heard, watching her face grow pale as I described her sister's casual cruelty and calculated betrayal. "She's using me too," Maren said quietly. "She's keeping me around to distract you while she plans your destruction." "Are you surprised?" "No. Disappointed, but not surprised. Isla's always been selfish, but this..." She shook her head. "This is something else entirely. The question is, are you still willing to help me stop her?" Maren looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something harden in her expression. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to be my eyes and ears at her office. I need to know about every meeting, every phone call, every email. Can you do that?" "Yes. But Wes, what you heard today, it's going to change you. I can see it already." She was right. Something had changed during those hours under the deck, listening to my wife plan my humiliation. The man who'd driven out to the cabin that morning had still harbored some hope for reconciliation, some belief that their marriage might be salvaged. The man who'd driven home was someone else entirely. "Maybe change isn't such a bad thing," I said. "Just remember what I asked you to promise." "I remember." But as I sat there planning my next move, I wondered if I'd be able to keep that promise. The cold anger growing inside me felt too good, too righteous to abandon. Isla wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to discover that she wasn't the only one who knew how to cheat. Monday morning brought the first phase of my counterattack. While Isla showered, I slipped into our bedroom and placed a small voice-activated recorder in her purse, a device so tiny it looked like a USB drive. I'd ordered it online along with several others, all designed for home security purposes. At breakfast, I played the role of the oblivious husband perfectly. "How was your spa day?" I asked, buttering my toast with exaggerated care. "Refreshing," Isla replied without looking up from her phone. "Sometimes you need to step away from everything and just breathe." I'm sure Hunter would agree. Relaxation is so important for executive types. The comment was casual enough to seem innocent, but I caught the slight tightening around Isla's eyes. She was wondering how much I knew, how much I suspected. "Hunter wasn't there," she said carefully. "It was a women's retreat." Of course it was. Silly me. Maren watched this exchange with fascination, recognizing the subtext even if Isla missed it. My wife had always been arrogant, but her affair had made her sloppy. She assumed I was too weak to investigate, too trusting to verify her stories. After Isla left for work, Maren and I coordinated our strategy. She would monitor Isla's activities at the office while I focused on Brady, my supposedly loyal friend who'd been feeding information to my wife. "Be careful," Maren warned as she gathered her things. "If Isla suspects what we're doing..." "She won't. She's too busy planning her own schemes to notice ours." But as I drove to work, I wondered if I was being overconfident. Isla was many things, but she wasn't stupid. Eventually, she'd realize that her predictable husband was becoming unpredictable. My office was located in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town, housing a tech company that specialized in database management for small businesses. It wasn't glamorous work, but it had taught me valuable skills. How to organize information, how to identify patterns, how to build systems that could handle complex data. Brady found me during lunch break, sliding into the chair across from my desk with his usual casual manner. "Hey man, how was your weekend?" Quiet. Isla was at some spa thing, so Maren and I just hung around the house. I watched Brady's face carefully as I mentioned Maren. There, a slight flicker of interest, the kind of expression someone gets when they hear information they plan to report elsewhere. "Maren's still staying with you guys?" "For now. Isla's getting tired of having her around, but I don't mind the company." Another flicker. Brady was definitely cataloging this conversation for later transmission to my wife. "Speaking of company," Brady said, "want to grab drinks at the Foghorn tonight? It's been too long since we hung out." The Foghorn was our usual spot, a dive bar near the waterfront where locals went to complain about work and pretend their lives were more interesting than they actually were. Under normal circumstances, I would have accepted Brady's invitation without question. "Can't tonight? Rain check?" "Sure, no problem." Brady stood up, but I could see the disappointment in his expression. He'd probably promised Isla some intelligence about my activities, and I just denied him the opportunity to gather it. The rest of the afternoon dragged by with typical Monday monotony, emails, spreadsheets, conference calls about projects that would probably be canceled before completion, but my mind was focused on the evening ahead. If my timing was right, Isla would be meeting Hunter at the cabin again, and I'd be there to document it. At 5:30, I received a text from Maren. She left early, said she had errands to run. Perfect. I drove home, changed into dark clothing, and prepared for another night of surveillance. But this time, I wasn't just planning to listen. This time, I was going to get photographs. The drive to Hunter's cabin felt different than it had on Saturday. Then, I'd been motivated by suspicion and hurt. Now, I was driven by cold calculation. I knew exactly what I'd find at the cabin, exactly what I needed to document. I parked in the same spot and hiked through the woods, but instead of hiding under the deck, I positioned myself near the large picture window that faced the lake. From here, I could see into the main living area while remaining concealed behind a cluster of pine trees. They arrived separately again, Hunter first, then Isla 20 minutes later. I watched through the telephoto lens of my camera as they embraced in the doorway, Hunter's hands roaming over my wife's body with casual familiarity. The photos I took over the next hour would have been sufficient evidence for any divorce proceeding, but I wasn't interested in just winning a legal case. I wanted to understand the full scope of their betrayal, the complete picture of how they'd planned to destroy my life. So I waited until they moved to the deck for what appeared to be a serious conversation, then crept closer to activate the recorder I'd hidden during my previous visit. Brady says Wes has been acting strange lately, Hunter was saying. Strange how? More confident, less predictable. Brady thinks he might be suspicious about something. Brady's paranoid. Wes doesn't have the imagination to be suspicious. Maybe, but we should be careful. If he starts investigating, he won't. Trust me, I know my husband. He's weak, Hunter. He's always been weak. Even if he suspected something, he wouldn't have the courage to act on it. The contempt in her voice was absolute. This wasn't just infidelity. This was complete emotional destruction. Isla didn't just want to leave me, she wanted to crush me so thoroughly that I'd never recover. What about the money? Hunter asked. Almost finished transferring it. Another few weeks and I'll have moved everything to the Cayman account. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late to stop. And your sister? Maren's useful for now. She keeps Wes distracted and makes him feel like someone in the family actually cares about him. When this is over, she'll be just as destroyed as he is. I felt something snap inside me as I listened to Isla dismiss Maren's genuine kindness as manipulation. My wife wasn't just betraying me, she was planning to destroy the one person who'd shown me any compassion during this nightmare. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, covering details about the Hartley acquisition, Hunter's plans for promoting Isla after their affair became public, and their shared fantasy about my reaction when I discovered the truth. He'll probably cry, Isla said with a laugh. He might even beg me to stay. God, I can't wait to see his face when he realizes how completely he's been played. I'd heard enough. More than enough. As I crept back through the woods toward my truck, I felt the last vestiges of the man I'd been dissolving away. The hurt, the hope, the desire for reconciliation. All of it was gone, replaced by something colder and more focused. Isla thought she knew me. She thought she could predict my reactions, control my responses, manipulate my emotions. She'd built her entire plan around the assumption that I was weak, passive, and ultimately harmless. She was about to discover how wrong she was. When I got home, Maren was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and an expression of barely contained anxiety. Well? She asked. I told her everything, showing her the photographs, playing back portions of the recorded conversation. With each revelation, I watched her face grow paler and her expression harder. She's planning to destroy both of us, Maren said finally. Yes, but she made one crucial mistake. What's that? She told me exactly how she plans to do it. Now I can use her own strategy against her. What's the next step? I looked at my sister-in-law, this woman who'd been dismissed and underestimated by her own family, and felt something shift in my chest. We were both casualties in Isla's war, both victims of her casual cruelty, but we didn't have to remain victims. Now we turn the tables, I said, and we make sure that when this is over, Isla understands exactly what it feels like to lose everything. The beauty of having an inside source was that Maren could observe Isla's daily routine without raising suspicion. Over the next week, she provided me with a detailed picture of my wife's activities. Every meeting, every phone call, every moment of vulnerability. She's getting careless, Maren reported during one of our evening strategy sessions in my basement office. Yesterday, she took a personal call from Hunter right in the middle of a staff meeting. Everyone could tell it wasn't business. What about Brady? Any contact between them at the office? Constant. He stops by her desk at least 3 times a day, always with some excuse about IT security or system updates. But they're definitely sharing information. I leaned back in my chair, studying the timeline I'd created on my whiteboard. Isla's plan was elegant in its simplicity: isolate me, steal from me, then destroy me emotionally before discarding me publicly. But every plan had weak points, and I was beginning to identify hers. I need you to do something risky, I told Maren. How risky? I need you to access Isla's computer, just for a few minutes while she's in a meeting or away from her desk. Maren looked nervous but determined. What am I looking for? Email correspondence with Hunter, financial records, anything that documents their planning. And if I get caught? Then we abort the whole operation and go straight to divorce court with what we already have. She nodded slowly. When? Tomorrow. There's a department meeting at 2 o'clock that should keep her occupied for at least an hour. The next afternoon, I sat in my own office, staring at my phone and waiting for Maren's text. At 2:15, it arrived. I'm in. For the next 45 minutes, I barely breathed. If Maren was discovered accessing Isla's computer, everything would unravel. My wife would realize she was being investigated, and she'd accelerate her timeline for destroying me. At 3:02, another text. Got it. Meet me tonight. That evening, Maren arrived at my house with a USB drive and an expression of grim satisfaction. Your wife is even worse than we thought, she said, plugging the drive into my laptop. The files she'd copied painted a picture of betrayal so complete it took my breath away. Email threads between Isla and Hunter dating back 8 months, detailing not just their affair, but their systematic plan to destroy my reputation and steal my assets. Financial documents showing the gradual transfer of money from our joint accounts to offshore holdings. Even a draft divorce petition that painted me as an emotionally abusive husband who'd driven his wife into the arms of another man. But the most damaging evidence was a series of emails between Isla and Brady, documenting his role as an informant and saboteur. Brady had been providing Isla with information about my work performance, my personal habits, even my private conversations with him. In return, Isla had promised to get him a better position at her company after she left me. There's more, Maren said quietly. Look at this. She opened another folder containing documents I hadn't expected, a detailed psychological profile of me, apparently compiled by Isla over months of observation. It described my weaknesses and pressure points, with clinical precision, mapping out exactly how to manipulate my emotions and control my responses. She's been studying you like a lab rat, Maren said, and now I have her research. I copied the files to my own secure drive, already planning how to use them. This changes everything. How? Because now I know exactly what she expects me to do, which means I can do the opposite. Over the next few days, I began implementing a strategy that turned Isla's own psychological profile against her. According to her research, I was conflict avoidant and desperate for approval. So I started seeking out conflicts and dismissing her attempts at manipulation. When she complained about Maren's extended stay, I told her bluntly that her sister was welcome as long as she wanted to remain. When she criticized my appearance or work performance, I shrugged and changed the subject. When she tried to guilt me about our failing marriage, I agreed that it was indeed failing and suggested we should probably do something about it. The change in dynamic clearly unsettled her. Isla was accustomed to controlling conversations and manipulating emotions. When I stopped responding to her usual tactics, she became increasingly frustrated and sloppy. What's gotten into you lately? She demanded one evening after I'd dismissed her criticism of my job with casual indifference. Nothing's gotten into me. Maybe something's gotten out of me. What's that supposed to mean? Figure it out. You're the smart one in this relationship, remember? I could see her calculating, trying to understand this shift in my behavior. According to her psychological profile, I should have been growing more desperate and clingy as our marriage deteriorated. Instead, I was becoming more independent and confident. The confusion was exactly what I wanted. Confused opponents make mistakes, and I was counting on Isla to make a big one. It didn't take long. 3 days later, Maren reported that Isla had scheduled an emergency meeting with Hunter, clearly rattled by my unexpected behavior. She's panicking, Maren said. She keeps asking me questions about what you do when she's not around, whether you've been acting strange, if you've mentioned anything about her or your marriage. What do you tell her? That you seem fine. Maybe a little happier lately, but nothing dramatic. Perfect. Let her wonder. That night, I received a text from Brady. Want to grab drinks? Need to talk. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for. Brady was clearly under pressure from Isla to gather intelligence about my state of mind. Instead of avoiding him, I decided to give him exactly what he was looking for, but not what he expected. The foghorn was busy for a Wednesday night, filled with the usual crowd of locals nursing beers and complaints. Brady was already at our usual table when I arrived, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. "Thanks for coming," he said as I sat down. "I was starting to think you were avoiding me." "Just been busy, work, home stuff. You know how it is." "How are things with Isla?" There it was, the question he'd been sent to ask. I took a long sip of my beer, pretending to consider my answer. "Honestly, better than they've been in months." Brady looked surprised. "Really? You guys seemed pretty tense at the charity event." "That was just a misunderstanding. We talked it out." I leaned forward, lowering my voice conspiratorially. "Actually, I think the whole thing with Maren staying with us has been good for our relationship. It's reminded us what we have together." This was complete fiction, but Brady absorbed it eagerly. I could practically see him composing the report he'd deliver to Isla later. "That's great, man. I was worried about you two." "No need to worry. In fact, I'm thinking about surprising Isla with a romantic getaway. Maybe that cabin resort up by the lake. She's always talking about how peaceful it is up there." Brady's face went pale. "The lake?" "Yeah, you know the area I mean? All those private cabins, very secluded, perfect for a second honeymoon." I watched Brady struggle with this information. If I was planning a romantic surprise at the same lake where Isla met Hunter, it would create a disaster for their affair. But he couldn't warn me away without revealing knowledge he shouldn't possess. Maybe somewhere more exotic?" he suggested weakly. "The Caribbean, or... Nah, Isla loves it here in Maine. Local is better." I finished my beer and stood up, leaving Brady sitting there with a look of barely concealed panic. "Thanks for the drink. I should get home to my wife." As I walked out of the foghorn, I felt a savage satisfaction. By morning, Brady would have reported our conversation to Isla, and she'd be forced to confront an impossible situation. If she tried to discourage my romantic cabin idea, she'd have to explain how she knew it was a bad choice. If she said nothing, she'd risk me discovering her affair by accident. Either way, she'd be off balance and making desperate decisions. The game was accelerating, and for the first time in months, I was the one controlling the pace. The trap I'd set with Brady worked better than I'd anticipated. Within 24 hours, Isla was showing clear signs of panic. She started checking her phone obsessively, jumped every time it rang, and began asking seemingly casual questions about my weekend plans. "You mentioned something about a cabin getaway," she said over breakfast, trying to sound nonchalant. "Did I? I don't remember." "Brady said you were thinking about the lake area." "Brady talks too much." I looked up from my newspaper, studying her face. "Why? Is there something wrong with the lake?" "No, of course not. I just thought maybe we could go somewhere new, break our usual patterns." "Our usual patterns?" I let a note of confusion creep into my voice. "When was the last time we went anywhere together, Isla? I can't even remember." She flinched at the accuracy of that statement. We hadn't taken a real vacation together in over 2 years, and our last romantic getaway had been a disaster of forced conversation and mutual resentment. "That's exactly why we should do something special," she said, but I could hear the desperation beneath her words. "Maybe, let me think about it." I left her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone with the expression of someone watching their carefully constructed world begin to crumble. At work, I received regular updates from Maren about the chaos unfolding at Isla's office. My wife had called 3 emergency meetings with Hunter, each one more frantic than the last. She'd also been making mistakes, missing deadlines, forgetting appointments, snapping at colleagues who questioned her decisions. "She's falling apart," Maren reported during our evening check-in. "Hunter's getting nervous too. I heard him on the phone with someone talking about damage control and exit strategies. They're realizing their plan isn't as foolproof as they thought. What's the next move?" I'd been considering that question all day. Isla was panicking, which made her dangerous, but also vulnerable. If I pushed too hard, she might do something desperate. If I didn't push hard enough, she might regain her composure and adapt her strategy. "It's time for the direct approach," I said finally. "Meaning?" "I'm going to confront her, tonight." Maren looked alarmed. "Are you sure that's wise? If she realizes how much you know..." "She already suspects I know something. The uncertainty is driving her crazy, which is exactly what I want. But now I need to control the narrative before she does something that forces my hand." That evening, I waited until Maren had gone to her room before approaching Isla in our living room. She was sitting on the couch with her laptop, supposedly working, but actually staring at the screen without typing. "We need to talk," I said, settling into the chair across from her. She looked up with poorly concealed anxiety. About what? About Hunter Pace. About the cabin. About the money you've been moving to offshore accounts. The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing without sound. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally managed. Yes, you do. I pulled out my phone and played a brief clip from one of my recordings, her voice clearly discussing the transfer of our joint assets to accounts I couldn't access. Isla's laptop slid from her fingers onto the couch cushions. You've been spying on me. I've been protecting myself. There's a difference. How long have you known? Long enough. The question is, what do we do now? For several seconds, we stared at each other across the coffee table that had witnessed 8 years of marriage, birthday celebrations, Christmas mornings, quiet evenings that now seemed like memories from someone else's life. Then Isla's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Pure, calculating hatred. You think you're so clever, she said quietly. You think you've outsmarted me. I think I've learned who you really are. And who am I, Wes? Tell me what you've discovered about your wife. The contempt in her voice was absolute, but there was something else there too, a kind of relief, as if she was glad to finally drop the pretense. You're someone who's been planning to destroy me for months, someone who's been stealing from me, lying to me, and using my best friend to spy on me, someone who sees other people as obstacles or tools, nothing more. You're right. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that were perfectly steady now. I am all of those things, but you know what else I am? I'm someone who's about to make your life a living nightmare. Really? How? By tomorrow morning, everyone in this town will know that you've been stalking me, recording my private conversations, and making threats against my safety. Brady will testify that you've been acting erratically for weeks. Hunter will confirm that I came to him for protection from an increasingly unstable husband. I felt a chill of genuine fear. Isla wasn't just planning to leave me. She was planning to destroy my reputation so thoroughly that I'd be lucky to avoid criminal charges. By the time I'm finished, she continued, you'll be lucky to get supervised visitation with a houseplant, let alone any kind of favorable divorce settlement. And Maren. Maren will do what she's told, just like she always has. She's weak, just like you. The only difference is that she knows it. I stood up slowly, looking at this woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years, who'd promised to love and honor me, who'd become something monstrous without my even noticing. You're wrong about Maren, I said quietly. And you're wrong about me. We'll see. Yes, we will. I left her standing in the living room and went upstairs to pack a bag. If Isla was planning to accuse me of stalking and making threats, I needed to be somewhere else when she made her move. But as I threw clothes into a duffel bag, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Excitement. Isla thought she'd just delivered a crushing blow, thought she'd regained control of the situation. What she didn't realize was that she'd just given me everything I needed to destroy her completely. The game was entering its final phase, and I was no longer playing defense. I was ready to win. I spent the night at a motel on the outskirts of town, a place where truckers and traveling salesmen paid cash for rooms that smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. It wasn't comfortable, but it served my purpose. I needed to be somewhere with security cameras and witnesses, somewhere that would establish my whereabouts when Isla made her accusations. At 6 a.m., I received the text I'd been expecting from Maren. She's gone. Left early with 2 suitcases. What do I do? I called her instead of texting back. Where did she go? I don't know. She was on the phone with someone when she left. I think it was Hunter. She kept saying, we need to accelerate the timeline. Perfect. That means she's panicking, making decisions based on fear instead of strategy. Wes, she took papers from your office. Financial documents, insurance policies, stuff like that. Let her take them. I have copies of everything, plus documentation she doesn't know about. What's the plan? I looked out the motel window at the gray Maine morning, at the fog rolling in from the harbor, and felt a cold certainty settle over me. Today we finish this. The first step was a visit to Detective Myra Shaw, an old friend who worked domestic cases for the county sheriff's department. Myra and I had known each other since high school, and she had a reputation for being thorough and fair. Wes Farrow, she said when I walked into her office. It's been a long time. What brings you here? I need to report a theft and document some threats I've received. For the next hour, I walked Myra through the evidence I'd gathered, the financial records showing Isla's systematic theft of our joint assets, the recordings of her planning my destruction, the emails documenting her conspiracy with Hunter and Brady. This is pretty comprehensive, Myra said, reviewing the documents. How long have you been investigating your own wife? Long enough to know she's planning to accuse me of stalking and making threats. I wanted to get my side on record first. Smart. These recordings? Are they legal? Recorded on my own property or in public spaces? I checked the statutes carefully. Myra nodded approvingly. Always the careful one. What do you want me to do with this? For now, just document it. If Isla files false charges against me, I want there to be a paper trail showing her real motivations. And if she doesn't file charges? Then I handle this privately. Myra studied my face with the expression of someone who'd seen too many domestic disputes go wrong. Be careful, Wes. Revenge has a way of consuming the people who pursue it. This isn't revenge. This is justice. Sometimes there's not much difference. I left the sheriff's office with official documentation of my evidence and a promise from Myra to investigate any charges Isla might file with appropriate skepticism. But I knew Isla was too smart to involve the police unless she was absolutely desperate. Her preferred battlefield was social and professional destruction. The second step was a visit to Isla's office. I arrived during lunch hour, when most of the staff would be away from their desks. The receptionist recognized me as Isla's husband and waved me through without question. I found Hunter Pace in his corner office, pacing behind his desk while talking on his phone. When he saw me, his face went pale. "I'll call you back," he said, ending his conversation. "Wes, what are you doing here?" "Looking for my wife. She seems to have disappeared." "I wouldn't know anything about that." "Really? Because I have recordings of you and Isla discussing your plans to destroy my life. I have photographs of you together at your cabin. I have financial records showing how you helped her steal my money." Hunter's composure cracked completely. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something very clearly. If Isla files false charges against me, if she tries to destroy my reputation with lies, I will release everything I have about your affair. Your wife, your boss, your colleagues, everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are." "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and played a brief audio clip of Hunter's voice discussing the Cayman account, where he'd helped Isla hide stolen money. "I can prove everything. The question is whether I need to." Hunter sank into his chair, looking older than his years. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to convince Isla to drop whatever scheme she's planning. I want you to help her understand that she's lost this game." "And if I do that?" "Then maybe your wife never has to hear these recordings. Maybe your boss never sees these photographs. Maybe you get to keep your job and your marriage." "You're threatening me." "I'm offering you a choice. Make it wisely." I left Hunter's office and went looking for Maren, finding her at her desk in the HR department. She looked relieved to see me. "Thank God you're here. Isla's been calling all morning, asking about you. She wanted to know if you'd been to the office, if you'd talked to anyone, if you seemed unstable." "What did you tell her?" "That I hadn't seen you. But Wes, she's planning something big. I can feel it." "Let her plan. I'm ready for whatever she throws at me." "Are you sure about that?" I looked at Maren, this woman who'd been dismissed and underestimated by her own sister, who'd chosen to stand with me despite the risks, and felt something shift in my chest. "No," I said honestly. "But I'm sure about this. Isla's reign of terror is over. Today." The third and final step came that evening, when Isla returned to our house with Hunter in tow. I was waiting in the living room when they walked in, sitting calmly in my chair like a judge preparing to deliver a verdict. "Wes," Isla said, her voice artificially bright, "we need to talk." "I agree. Hello, Hunter. Thanks for joining us." Hunter looked like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world, but he followed Isla into the living room and took a seat on the couch. "I want you to know," Isla began, "that I've decided to be generous in our divorce settlement. Despite your recent behavior, I'm willing to let you keep the house and half of our savings." "How magnanimous." "What recent behavior?" "The stalking, the recording, the threats. But I'm willing to overlook all of that if we can settle this amicably." I pulled out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table between us. "Before you continue," I said, "I think you should see this." Isla opened the folder, and her face went white. Inside were copies of every email she'd exchanged with Hunter, every financial document showing her theft, every piece of evidence I'd gathered about their conspiracy. "The original recordings and photographs are in a safe deposit box," I continued. "Copies have been given to Detective Shaw at the Sheriff's Department. Additional copies are with my lawyer, with instructions to release them if anything happens to me." Hunter made a strangled sound. "You said you'd keep quiet if—" I said I'd keep quiet if Isla dropped her schemes, but she just walked into my house and tried to blackmail me with false accusations. That changes things. Isla was staring at the documents with an expression of growing horror. You can't release this. It would destroy both of us. Yes, it would. Hunter would lose his job, his marriage, probably face criminal charges for helping you embezzle money. You'd lose everything, your career, your reputation, your freedom. What do you want? She whispered. I want you to understand that you lost this game the moment you underestimated your opponent. I want you to realize that your weak, pathetic husband was actually 3 steps ahead of you the entire time. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the fog-shrouded street where we'd lived as husband and wife for 8 years. The divorce papers are already filed, I said without turning around. You'll get nothing from our joint assets except what the court determines you're legally entitled to, which won't be much considering the theft charges. Hunter's wife received copies of the photographs this afternoon. His boss gets the financial records tomorrow morning. You're destroying innocent people, Isla said desperately. I'm destroying people who tried to destroy me. There's a difference. I turned back to face them, these 2 people who'd planned my humiliation with such casual cruelty and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Game over, Isla. You lost. As I walked out of the house, my house, which I'd be keeping thanks to Isla's documented theft, I heard her start to cry. But they weren't tears of remorse or regret. They were tears of rage and frustration, the tears of someone who'd finally met an opponent they couldn't manipulate or control. I drove through the foggy streets of our small Maine town, past the foghorn where Brady was probably drowning his sorrows, past the office building where Hunter was likely cleaning out his desk, past all the familiar landmarks of a life I was leaving behind. At the motel, Maren was waiting for me with coffee and a sad smile. It's over? She asked. It's over. How do you feel? I considered the question carefully. How did I feel? Victorious, certainly, satisfied with the completeness of my revenge. But there was something else, something darker that I didn't want to examine too closely. I feel like I won, I said finally. And what did you win? I looked at this woman who'd stood by me when her own sister had betrayed me, who'd risked everything to help me expose the truth, and realized I didn't have a good answer to her question. I don't know, I admitted, but I know what I didn't lose. What's that? Everything. Outside, the fog continued to roll in from the harbor, shrouding the town in gray mystery. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, a new life built from the ashes of the old one. But tonight, I was content to sit in this cheap motel room with the only person who'd remained loyal to me, watching the fog erase the familiar landmarks of a world I no longer belonged to. Truth or dare, Isla? You chose dare, and you lost everything. Game, set, match.